For The Perfect Scam, I'm your host, Michelle Kosinski.
And I'm Frank Abagnale.
Frank has played a doctor, a lawyer, a pilot, and now he's playing a podcast host. He joins me, along with other top fraud experts, to share some of America's biggest scam stories.
Somebody's always going to be trying to come up with a new scheme. It's just too much money to be made easily.
Frauds, scams, con artists, shocking tales of deceit. You name it, we got it all. The Perfect Scam from AARP.
Every day this week, we wanted to spend a half hour talking to the different candidates who have decided to step forward to offer themselves up as potential Republican candidates to challenge the Democrat incumbent, Abigail Spanberger, who is facing her first re-election challenge here in Central Virginia in the 7th Congressional District. And just for those of you who emailed me yesterday, I have invited Congresswoman Spanberger on the program. I'm hoping that she will come next Tuesday, 1 week from today, after we have heard from all of the Republican candidates. Want to be very fair here on WRVA and give everybody an opportunity to express themselves, and that way the Congresswoman can respond to the things that have been said about her for a whole week. So if you were concerned that I was not going to be fair yesterday, let me just make sure that you know that that is a part of my plan. We've got 6 Republicans, and today our second candidate joins us here on the air. He's an impressive guy. I've heard him speak a number of times. His name is Andrew Knaggs. And Andrew, I'm glad to have you here today.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me on this morning.
For folks who have not had an opportunity to hear you speak or not familiar with your bio, I know you've done this at least once here on WRVA, but just tell me about yourself, where you came from, your background, and why you've chosen to get into this particular race.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks again for having me on, and this is a good opportunity to engage with folks. The first thing that folks need to understand about me is that I just left the Trump administration, where I served for 2 years, served the president for 2 years, helping him root out terrorism around the world in the job of Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Combating Terrorism. Earlier in my career, I'm a West Point grad with a civil engineering degree, 2 combat tours in Iraq as a Green Beret. I was a Special Forces officer. And then after 9 years in the Army, I left the service and went to law school at William and Mary. And while I was there, I was president of the Federalist Society and an editor of the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy. And then after graduation, I went on to start my own law firm, and where I practiced business law, helping businesses grow and create jobs and generally be successful across the board.
Well, if you were at William and Mary as president of the Federalist Society, I can imagine that was that wasn't the most welcome environment to be in. So there's nothing that's going to happen in this campaign that you're not prepared for, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's right. And the truth is that I've been, in this time of national crisis, one of the things that I think people are interested in is whether or not their elected representatives have what it takes to deal with complex situations. And I've done that throughout my career. I have dealt with crises from the time that I was commanding a Special Forces team in Iraq. And that's one of the reasons why I was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for that service, but also all the way up through the time that I was working with small businesses, trying to solve difficult problems of, figuring out how to work with the federal government or investors or other companies, and then all the way through serving President Trump as one of his senior executives in the Pentagon. So one thing I know for certain is that I am proven as far as being able to deal with those complex situations and crises.
The Trump administration credential that you started with, I think, will resonate with a lot of people. But I want to tell you, I think some individuals in Central Virginia who are conservative have been worried that they would elect somebody, choose someone with good intentions, but then when they get to whether it's the state capitol or the capitol in D.C., they start to fold. Their conservative principles wind up getting, kind of overrun with competing interests out there. And since you have not served in an elected position before where you have a track record of voting, how would you respond to that concern?
Well, it's a very real concern. I think we have dealt for far too long with representatives, Republican representatives, who, while they are in the district, they say the right things. They are, they spew fire and brimstone, but then they get to D.C. and then we start losing those minor battles, all of the ones which aggregate to losing these big wars. And the bottom line is that we need to stop sending folks to Washington, D.C. who don't understand what they stand for. So what I would say, John, to that is that I understand why I'm a conservative. I understand the distinction between the political commitment of being a Republican, between that and the ideological foundation of being a conservative. In fact, people ask me all the time, hey, what distinguishes you from the other candidates? I tell them there's four main reasons. The first is the breadth and depth of my professional experience, and we've already talked about that. There's really no other candidate in this race who is more qualified than I am. So that's the first reason. The second reason is my genuine belief in conservative principles, and that is founded on a lifelong study, being a lifelong student of what it means to be a conservative. I'm not new to this. I was a conservative and a Republican since before I even started at West Point, so I can truly articulate what that means. And then the third reason is that I understand the D.C. swamp after having worked there and operated there for years, done business there for years, and then representing President Trump for 2 years there. And the fourth reason is my unquestionable support for President Trump. All of that aggregates to this package that people should be clear and are able to have confidence that they can count on me not to fold, because I know what I stand for. I believe in our community, and I'm going there not to make friends, but to fight for our values.
Even if people look at your resume and think, wow, this guy's super impressive, I have heard some people who've said, I just don't think he can raise the money. He's not plugged in enough to raise the money. Mm-hmm. And, you're going to be taking on, if you got the nomination, you'd be taking on a pretty high-profile freshman congresswoman that clearly has a lot of Virginia Democrats rallying around her, and they're willing to cut checks. Do you think that that's a legitimate concern if you were to get the nomination, that you couldn't outraise her or keep up with Spanberger?
No, not at all. I understand the concern, but it's really born of this narrative that it is the money that counts. Now, look, I'm not saying that anybody can just walk into a race and underperform in terms of fundraising and still win. You have to take the fundraising seriously. But what really matters in this race, John, is not the dollars, it's the ideas. It's it's who on the Republican side can actually convince Republicans that that individual will stand for them in Washington, D.C. and get them to the polls. Yes, the money helps in terms of getting your message out there. But look, if money was the only thing that matters, first of all, Michael Bloomberg would be the Democrat nominee right now. And we would have to pack it in because and basically not run, because there is much more money available to the Democrats on their side than there is to us. Again, the money's not unimportant, but that is not the key here. What we need to do is to focus on who it is that shares our values and has a demonstrated ability to fight, an inclination to go on offense and take the fight to the Democrats. And Abigail Spanberger cannot walk into this race without being challenged. And the money helps, but that's not the only thing.
Andrew Knaggs is one of the Republicans seeking the Republican nomination in the 7th Congressional District. We're going to come back and continue this conversation in a moment. I want to ask you about Abigail Spanberger, your concerns about the convention that's coming up. I saw a press release that you all issued, I guess, this morning about the convention, and your reaction to Democrats and how they're managing the state with the virus issue and the economics about that. If we can squeeze all that in real quick when we return in a moment on News Radio WRVA. Back now with Andrew Knaggs, who is one of the candidates seeking the Republican nomination to challenge the incumbent Democrat Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. Andrew Knaggs just kind of walked through his, there's just no way to deny it, pretty impressive personal and professional resume. But I wanted to ask you if you could tell me what it is that Abigail Spanberger has done as a congresswoman, or not done as a congresswoman, in her first 2 years in Congress that makes you convinced that she shouldn't be returned. She's managed to avoid, I think, any big scandals or any kind of huge controversy. Maybe that's the press kind of playing in her favor because they potentially agree with her. But what would you single out as the top reasons that she shouldn't be returned?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really, the bottom line is that Abigail Spanberger simply does not represent the same values and ideals that the 7th District does. And that's across a number of different areas. And they, the top three, if I had to choose right now, would have to do with life and her views on life, on the abortion issue. The second one would be her soft stance with respect to China, and then finally immigration. She's of the same mind as the rest of her party. And with respect to life, think about it. In 2017, there were about 17,000 abortions performed in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now compare that to the loss of life that we are undoubtedly facing now in this coronavirus crisis. And my heart goes out to everyone who is impacted by the virus. But we've lost on the order of 17 times as many babies and Americans in the womb as we have lost up until this point with the coronavirus. And that happened without anyone batting an eyelash. The Democrat Party of 2020 is so extreme that they can't suffer any views that deviates from abortion at any time for any reason and paid for with taxpayer funds. I will stand against that. Abigail Spanberger will not. And then with respect to China, look, the Democrat Party has stood by while the Chinese have cheated us and abused our trade deals, stole our intellectual property. They've done nothing as the Chinese have taken classified information with respect to the Joint Strike Fighter or other aviation technology. And President Trump has finally taken strong action. I will stand with President Trump to finish that job.
China's a big problem. You're running as an African American man. There are a lot of people who I think found it for some reason very appealing to have a woman represent Central Virginia in Congress. Do you think that your status as an African American man in Central Virginia should be something that people contemplate going to Congress?
No, it absolutely should not matter. And the thing that I've been telling people around the district is we need to set aside this curiosity or infatuation with identity politics. That is the language and the philosophy of the left. And if we go down that road, what's going to happen is we're going to keep losing elections and we're going to lose the soul of the party. What we need to be focused on is genuine conservatives that understand what they stand for, that share our values, and is willing to fight in Washington, D.C. and finish the job. And I'm absolutely willing to do that. And I will help President Trump finish the job that he began in this term. That's what matters, not the color of my skin.
The clock is working against us here. There's so many other questions I'd like to ask, but I really appreciate you devoting this half hour with us. Andrew Knaggs, who is running as one of the Republican candidates, will be deciding, I guess, in late June or July, who will receive the nomination for the 7th Congressional District to challenge Abigail Spanberger, the incumbent Democrat. Andrew Knaggs, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, John. It's been great.